we played a crucial role in getting the fiscal policies passed through the National Assembly on behalf of the e-mobility stakeholders, and with the support of organizations like UNEP. And that is why, Alex, thank you very much for coming. You played a very critical role supporting us in this initiative. We've also have initiatives on renewable energy. I know some of us are going to talk much about solarization, and there's a lot of talk about geothermal, green hydrogen, and also wind. Clean cooking is an area of interest. We've run initiatives on ESG initiatives and reporting, but working with institutions like the Nairobi Securities Exchange, Central Bank of Kenya, to see how businesses can comply when it comes to ESG compliance. Carbon markets and monetization is a new area where many of us are struggling, and we're trying to see how we can come up with policies, working with the public sector to see how we can improve on carbon credits monetization. We're also looking at the circular economy and putting up green buildings and infrastructure within the cities and across the country. So, ladies and gentlemen, as businesses, we should collaborate with government, financial institutions like we have IFC here today, we have NCBA, and many other banks that have come out and taken the lead in this front when it comes to business sustainability, and see how we can create an environment that is conducive to climate finance. So in conclusion, I would like to say ICC, including ICC Kenya, plays a pivotal role in advancing green growth and climate finance solutions. Sustainability is no longer an option, but it has now become a necessity. Together, we can build a future where economic prosperity aligns with environmental stewardship. So before I conclude my remarks, I would like to recognize each one of us who have come here today. But since we don't have much time, I'll do it in form of groups. So what we've done, we've just tried to segment, we've come up with different groups. So we have, for example, from the sustainable finance and sustainable agricultural sectors, we have representatives from KCB Bank Assurance, KCB Foundation, Nairobi Securities Exchange. We have Africa Guarantee Fund, OCP Africa, and Biofoods. So I would ask the esteemed ladies and gentlemen from these institutions to raise your hands so we can recognize you for having come to here today. Then from renewable energy, telecommunications, innovation, and technology, we have Haas Petroleum, Total Energies, Kai Energy Tech, DPA, we have Microsoft Africa, American Towers Corporation, Simplex Systems, Crown EdTech Solutions, and even Frontier Limited. Could you please raise your hands, ladies and gentlemen, so to recognize your presence? Under e-mobility, charging infrastructure, and clean cooking sectors, we have representatives from EB Africa, we have CIFAO, and BARN. Please raise your hands, we recognize you. Thank you. Then from the circular economy, manufacturing, legal, and carbon markets monetization sectors, we have Coca-Cola Africa, ALN, Deloitte East Africa, South Pole and Sequest Capital. If you're here, please raise your hand so that we acknowledge you. Thank you. From afforestation and green building and infrastructure, we have representatives from the Tribe and Trademark Hotel, hosted by our good friend Manish. Where is Manish here? Thank you, Manish. We have Kenya Green Building Society, David Roberts Solutions. So where's David Roberts? I saw, yes, thank you for coming. And then we also have business membership organizations here with us today. And anyone from the French Chamber of Commerce? French Chamber has been quite supportive. Okay, they're not here. And I'm seeing some of us have just walked in. We have Biofoods representative, that's Waithera. Thank you for coming. Biofoods are very strong in sustainable agriculture. And then we had, is Julia Stinega here from the Office of the First Lady? Okay. And then from ICC, we have a number of officials here. Our chair, Patrick, will take over from me after my, after my presentation. But I would like to acknowledge our directors, Sam Nderitu, who is here. Sam, thank you. Sam is one of the founding directors of ICC Kenya. Then we have Pascalina Kigunda. Is Pascalina here, Secretary General? We have committee chairs. We have Leila Ahmed. Leila, please raise your hand. Thank you. Kenneth Miriti. Is Kenneth here? Okay. And then we're also joined by partner sponsors. So we have two sponsors that have come out quite strongly to support us. That is EDF, who will be doing a presentation here, led by the country director, Dennis Kerr. We'll also appreciate you for that. Where's Dennis? Thanks, Dennis. And then we have our main sponsor, NCBA Bank. Very interesting, because NCBA Bank, I think about 1 week ago, launched the sustainability report and strategy and made commitments for the next, until 2030, commitments, I think.
I'll be a man of few words today, but I want to leave to some of the more action points. This week, we are also going to be supporting innovation, and especially low carbon innovation. And I'm pleased that I have our head of communications, who has been a champion on one of our programs that we've been running for 5 years called EDF Pulse Africa, and that is Christ Anderson. So Christ is going to show a video, and then Christ will just say a few words. Just a few words about Christ Anderson. He actually started his career as a football player. He played for Cote d'Ivoire national team. He's been around Queen's Park Rangers, Torino. So I don't know how he ended up at EDF, but so thank you, Christ. If you can come over while you just kind of launch. We're going to be having Pulse Africa this week. He'll explain a bit more about that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I would like to be in discretion. No, be careful. In discretion. Thank you very much. Nice. All that. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very glad to be here. I'm Chris Anderson. I'm head of Communication Africa in EDF, Électricité de France, based in Paris. And I'm very glad to be here for my second time in Kenya. So thank you for hosting me. And as Denise mentioned, I manage the EDF Pulse Africa program because I would like to introduce my speech by something. When you talk about innovation in Africa, innovation at the heart of energy, there is three observations. The first one is digitalization. I have a good example for that, obviously in Kenya. In Kenya, we start to pay by phone, and in France, we start to pay by phone, I don't know, maybe 1 year or 2 years ago. This is Africa. The second thing is the woman. Yes, Mrs., because we have a lot of women who lead the company to the domain of energy. This is also in innovation into the domain of energy. And the last thing is the support of the big group, the big company like EDF. EDF is a very big company, but we are not hesitate to adapt our raison d'être in France, to adapt our vision to collaborate with some startup, African startup, like Bbox, Kenya, like Sun Culture. And EDF Plus Africa is dedicated to the African startup and SME. We launched EDF Plus Africa in 2017. This is my baby. I launched it. And to give you some key number, this year, for example, we received 427 applications. We touch 40 countries, on 54 countries in Africa. And for Eastern Africa, we have received 24 projects from startup. So we are very proud of that because we launched EDF Plus Africa Tour here in Kenya this week. And after we go to Mozambique, to Morocco, to South Africa, to Cameroon, and the last one in my country of origin, Ivory Coast. So I'm finished on that. I'm very happy to be here and happy to launch EDF Plus Africa 2023 here in Nairobi in Kenya. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have a video from our main sponsor today, NCBA, and we would like to play it before we invite our group director, Mr. Lennox. Thank you.
An integral part of the NCBA family. Together, we have achieved incredible milestones in building a bigger and more impactful business. I am immensely proud of what we have accomplished. Here at NCBA, we have identified sustainability as a key priority for our organization. It is more than a goal. It is recognizing that our license to operate is granted by the communities we serve. As a brand whose purpose is to inspire greatness, we have an opportunity to catalyze action towards a greener and more sustainable future. We believe that a sustainable future is a better future for everyone, that collectively we can chart a path forward to a more resilient society that can navigate the challenges of the future. That is why we're unveiling our sustainability commitments, our commitments to drive change and invest in our collective future. Through financing green projects and e-mobility solutions, we are doing our part to reduce reliance on fossil fuels. Our internal operations are also being retrofitted to reduce waste, enhance energy efficiency, and reduce our carbon footprint. We continue our tree growing efforts with an aim to grow 10 million trees by 2030 and contribute to the regional agenda for nature-based solutions to this pressing climate crisis. But we can't do it alone. We believe that everyone has a role to play. That is why we are committed to working with you, our stakeholders, our customers, and indeed our communities. We've made significant progress, but there's still work to be done. So join me in changing the story by committing to do these 5 things. 1, becoming more energy efficient. 2, ditching single-use plastics. 3, becoming an avid tree grower. 4, thinking before you print. And 5, becoming a sustainability champion and evangelizing to your community. Together, let's build a culture of responsibility and impact that leaves a legacy for generations to come. Join me and change the story. A sustainable future starts by doing good today.
evening, everyone. I think from the video, John has said it all. John is Group Managing Director. Thank you. Good, thank you. So John is a Group Managing Director, and I'm sure we've all followed what was playing, so I can stop my speech there, isn't it? But because I have a task to do, I have to fulfill it, yeah? So ICC Kenya Board Director and Chair, Environment and Energy Commission, Mr. Julius Opio. ICC Kenya Chairman, Mr. Patrick Obath. Country Director, EDF, Mr. Dennis Kea. Chairman, Nairobi Securities Exchange, Mr. Kiprono Kitoni. Regional Director, East Africa IFC, Ms. Mary Potter Peshka. I hope I got it right. Country Manager, Kenya, EB Africa, Ms. Olivia Lamenya. NCBA Group Director, Marketing, Communication and Citizenship, Ms. Nelly Wainaina. Pan-African Private Sector, Corporate Representatives, my fellow NCBA colleagues, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. It's an honor to stand here tonight on behalf of NCBA Group Managing Director, Mr. John Gashora, who is currently out of the country on official duty. He would have wished to be here, but at least he's given me an opportunity to stand in front of you. It's a pleasure to be here commemorating Kenya's significant strides in our commitment to climate change and our position as a bank in the walk towards a climate-friendly future. We are also delighted that our partnership has facilitated our inclusion in the annual corporate membership of the ICC Chamber of Commerce, International Chamber of Commerce. We are delighted to collaborate with like-minded stakeholders within this sector, and I'm happy that I've met quite a number of you, and I believe that our membership in it will actually help us prosper together. So, ladies and gentlemen, the theme of this dinner, Driving Green Growth and Climate Finance Solutions for Africa and the World, encapsulates the pivotal need to stimulate green growth and cultivate climate finance mechanisms, an imperative for navigating the trajectory towards a sustainable and low-carbon economy. Within the financial sector, events like this dinner and the ongoing week provides us with a platform to showcase and enhance our contribution as Africa stands united in support of global climate action. At NCBA, we understand that climate action and economic development are not in conflict, but interdependent. They need to happen together, or neither of them will happen. As an integral part of the global community, we are continually striving to achieve 3 climate finance goals. Number 1, more financing. Number 2, targeted financing. And number 3, cheaper, higher risk appetite financing. This is why we are excited to be part of the Africa Climate Summit, as the Assembly serves as a beacon for all African nations to unite in tackling the escalating threats posed by climate change, both at the global scale and within our continent. But beyond this excitement, are we doing enough to play our role? Ladies and gentlemen, green growth underscores an unequivocal call to interlace economic growth while promoting environmental sustainability and social well-being. Indeed, we must acknowledge that conventional methods of economic growth are not viable in the long run, since they frequently result in resource depletion, environmental degradation, and social inequality. By incorporating environmental considerations into economic policies and practices, green growth aims to uncouple economic growth from the detrimental environmental effects. As you've seen on the video in front of you, 2 weeks ago, NCBA, and Julius also alluded to it, yeah, two weeks ago, NCBA unveiled 15 sustainability commitments through our Change the Story platform. Some of these goals are greening our supply chain, embedding through assessment of climate-related risk in our lending, investment, and financing activities, building our commitment to mobilize and steer 30 billion shillings of green and sustainable financing, And lastly, aligning with the 2015 Paris Agreement to reduce our financed emissions by 2030. NCBA is also delighted, as you've seen on the screen as well, to be the first bank in Kenya to install EV charging stations at NCBA House, that is in Upper Hill, and NCBA Center, still also in Upper Hill, alongside the 2 billion shillings we've set aside to fund electrical vehicles last year. So Dennis, I hope when you're ready to sell electricals, yeah, we will be ready for you. Our reason for these commitments is to acknowledge the inherent connection between economic growth and environmental stewardship. Today, we cannot deny that the vulnerability of Africa to the impacts of climate change remains a stark reality. And our continent bears witness to the consequences firsthand, starting from prolonged droughts, shifting rainfall patterns, escalating temperatures, and the distressing loss of biodiversity. In our relentless pursuit of progress, it is our responsibility to ensure that our development trajectories do not compromise our invaluable natural heritage. We also need to realize that climate risk has profound implications for the financial sector and our institution, thus becoming a pivotal component of our bank's agenda. As responsible stewards of our stakeholders' interest, it is imperative that we address climate risk head-on and integrate it into our strategic planning and decision-making process. As I conclude, I'd like to reiterate that NCBA is a brand anchored on the premise that our license to operate is granted by the communities that we serve. We continue to promote sustainable practices and support our clients in transitioning to a low-carbon economy. And we also acknowledge that this is a journey best traveled together and consistently calling to action all industry players present today to feel free and share innovative strategies and best practices that can be adopted to collectively address climate challenges. As NCBA, we take pride in our role as a co-convener of this dinner, by extension, the Africa Climate Summit, and we eagerly look forward to working with other stakeholders to forge a more sustainable future for Africa and the world. As we say it at NCBA, let's go for it. And thank you, and enjoy the rest of the evening. Thank you. So having observed all protocols, I'd like to invite the chairman of the Nairobi Securities Exchange, Mr. Kiprono Kitoni.
Distinguished guests here present. Oh, my iPad's gone off. Huh? Our chief keynote speaker tonight, Mary Potter Peshka, Regional Director of the IFC World Bank Group. Patrick Obath, the Chairman of the ICC Kenya. Julius Opio, CBA, represented here by Lennox and the rest of the team. Business leaders here present, and I see many captains of industry, Guru, Manish, Dennis Awori, ladies and gentlemen in the house. It has been said that there is nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. And, the conversation about climate change, about sustainability, is one whose time has come. And doing nothing about this conversation on climate change will certainly mean that we are bequeathing a world that is less sustainable, that is less useful for future generations. Many times I ask myself, did our forefathers grapple with the crisis that we face today? And I think you all agree that we face an existential crisis in the world, and something needs to be done. And this dinner on the sidelines of the African Climate Summit is one such action that the private sector can take. It is a great pleasure for me and a privilege to join all of you today, and your presence here is a manifestation that we are taking this conversation seriously. It also reflects our views on this critical need to enhance climate change financing and to bring on board ideas that can be used to address the growing challenge that we are faced with. When I was invited here by Julius Appiah, I didn't know whether he was inviting me as a long-serving chamber leader or as a chair of the NSC, maybe as a dairy farmer who's not helping the situation, or a coffee farmer, but I do imagine he was inviting me as a chair of the NSC. And at the NSC, we are at the forefront of really pushing for ESG compliance. And we have made it mandatory for all listed companies to have sustainability reports. And I hope that as the year progresses, we will convince Guru, we will convince Dennis, we will convince Manish to list their companies so they also comply alongside us. As a continent, Africa is significantly vulnerable to the vagaries of climate change. We are the most vulnerable continent, both from a poverty perspective, despite having contributed the least to global warming and having the lowest emissions globally. Africa similarly faces exponential damages, collateral damages on account of climate change, posing systemic risk to economies, to populations, to infrastructure, to investments, to water and food systems, to public health, agriculture, and livelihoods. So we are that continent that really hasn't contributed much to the problem. But we are also the same continent that's been given so many promises that haven't been kept. Despite these challenges, Africa has one of the strongest potentials globally today. We have young populations, we have huge untapped resources, we have huge biodiversity as well, and mineral wealth. Notwithstanding its growing commitment towards green growth, the continent lags behind other regions in terms of green growth investment and the conversations around this all-important topic. It is not a secret that there is a significant financing challenge for these commitments. Africa's financing challenge gap by 2030 will be approximately $213 billion, which we all need to work together to mobilize annually from private sector, public sector, and the global community. Africa received $4.2 billion in private climate finance in 2019 and 2020, against $25 billion, which is only 14% of what was shared globally. You can see that the continent equally requires $2.7 trillion between now and 2030. It is against this reality that we gather today to explore some of these climate finance options that we can tap into and see what it is we can do to advocate for a stronger financing for green climate through climate financing. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe there is an opportunity for us and for the African private sector to rally and really raise this conversation to a level where we actualize the financing. African countries need to explore alternative sources of financing, and I'll mention some of them in a short while. And Kenya is one of the countries that is at the forefront of leading the charge. And I'm glad to say that today we heard that Kenya will be the spokesperson for Africa in the climate conversation. Let me talk briefly about green bonds. Africa has the potential to develop green bonds to finance industry, to finance infrastructure. At the NSC, we have one company, Acon, that has raised over 4 billion shillings through its green bonds. Growth of green bonds annually has grown, but in Africa it's not growing. And I'm glad to say that the NSC has cross-listed a green bond in Nairobi and London, and we are one of the first markets in Africa to explore these options. Carbon markets. We are working on developing a carbon exchange in Nairobi with other partners. And if we harness this, the carbon exchange can be a great source of activity, not just for Kenya, but the continent at large. Company-led initiatives, what NCB has just told us today, a fascinating story, fascinating practical solutions of how we can harness a circular economy. And really, I think what you're doing, Lennox, is amazing. And we need to ask many more companies to emulate what the NCBA is doing. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, I want to say that this can only happen if we believe in it. It can only happen if we commit ourselves to it. It can only happen if the private sector joins in putting its voice behind this conversation. And I want to say that at the NSC, we have about 3.6 trillion Kenya shillings in bonds and 1.6 trillion shillings in equities. The market is not as big as we would like it to be. We are committed to growing this market. We are committed to working with the Kenyan government to making sure that we are a source for funding, and we are looking green in as much as we can. With those few and many words, you can count on our participation, on our commitment, and on our leadership in ensuring compliance. And those few and many words, I'd like to take this opportunity to invite our chief guest and keynote speaker for tonight, the newly coined Regional Director of the IFC World Bank Group, Mary Potter Peshka. Welcome.
Good evening, and all protocols observed. That's what I learned from Dennis. So the bad news is you've eaten, and you're probably tired and ready to go, and I have a lot of pages. The good news is I don't wear these glasses for no reason. I can't see, so I promise you it's 24 font and won't be nearly as long as it looks. You know, more seriously, and you've heard it already, you heard it tonight, and you've heard it in other events in the last few days, Africa might not be the problem when it comes to emissions, but surely its countries are amongst the most vulnerable when it comes to the impacts of climate change. So we do need Africa as a partner. It is the promise for all the reasons that Patrick and Kiprono mentioned in their remarks. And in keeping with the theme of P's, we need the private sector. We need you all as we move forward. So it's a real pleasure to be here tonight to join the call for mobilizing greater private sector investment into Africa's green and resilient future. I think this week is really about coming together to accelerate our combined commitments for more sustainable development on the continent. And I think before I go further into my remarks, I'd like to acknowledge President William Ruto. I assume he's not here, and that's okay, for convening us in Nairobi. And I'd like to thank the ICC for hosting us tonight and giving us this opportunity to speak to you. Increasing financing to tackle climate change and its impact on lives and livelihoods is at the core of IFC's work. So tonight's topic is really an important topic for us. It hits close to home. We know that Africa is responsible for less than 4% of global greenhouse gas emissions. And as I already mentioned, nonetheless, your countries suffer the most, or at least are certainly amongst the most vulnerable, in part because of the heavy reliance on rain-fed agriculture and constrained government resources to respond and adapt to shocks. Between 1990 and 2019, Africa suffered more than 1,000 floods and droughts, leading to nearly 44,000 deaths and causing at least $14 billion in damage to crops, livestock, and property. We see the impact of climate change, especially here in Eastern Africa, where the longest drought in 40 years has contributed to rising food prices, threatening food security across the region. The choices Africa makes today will influence the continent's climate development, and hopefully I'm preaching to the choir here when I say that the private sector has a central role to play. Low carbon and climate resilient investments will be key to Africa's future, and there is significant opportunity. By 2050, Africa is expected to be home to 2.5 billion people, almost double what it is today. That's a quarter of the world's population. Additionally, sub-Saharan Africa's cities are currently home to more than 470 million people, and that's expected to double over the next 25 years, placing demands on housing, on transport, and on other services. And with 43% of the continent still living without access to electricity, we need a new path forward that combines advancements in sustainable technologies and massive investment in adaptation. In short, the continent has a unique opportunity to pursue a low-carbon development path. And the investment demand is there. In numbers, Africa needs $190 billion a year between now and 2030 for mitigation, and another $50 billion annually to 2050 for adaptation. There's no way the public sector is going to be able to fund this alone. Estimates show that about 3/4 of climate investment needs must come from the private sector to complement public sector financing. The private sector can help in developing clean infrastructure, reducing energy and water use, improving the climate resilience of cities and communities, and supporting natural capital and ecosystems. We've heard from the other speakers tonight about the investment potential of expanding renewable energy in Africa and how financial institutions can increase lending for clients to fund green development, including the use of innovative tools like green and sustainability bonds. I can only reiterate what they've said, as well as highlight the additional investment opportunities in greening manufacturing, building, transport, and agribusiness. For example, with smallholder agriculture accounting for about 70% of Africa's food production, private sector investment in irrigation, seeds, fertilizers, and storage facilities can have profound impact on food security while generating greater incomes for farmers and revenues for businesses. And with cities producing more than 70% of global carbon emissions, private sector investment for greener buildings and transport systems will make cities more livable and less polluted, and cut costs for builders through less energy and water use. I also want to spend a moment discussing adaptation, as it's an often overlooked area that requires urgent investment action. Too frequently, climate adaptation is viewed through the prism of how much an investment in a specific resilience building measure will cost a company or a country. We want to highlight that there are commercially viable investment opportunities that climate adaptation actions can create for the private sector. IFC research found that at a country level, upfront adaptation investment can generate a long-term return of 8%. This includes opportunities such as solar-powered crop irrigation systems that prevent harvests being decimated from droughts, and crop insurance that guarantees farmers a livable income if yields dramatically drop due to a weather-related event. Implementing green development goals can be expensive, but the positive effects are priceless. Institutions like IFC have an important role to play to facilitate markets for green financing and investment, and to support the development of projects that are ripe for private sector investment. In the last financial year that ended in June, we committed $876 million for the continent's green energy transition, and another $1.2 billion in financing to support financial institutions to expand their climate and sustainability financing. In Kenya, we're working with Equity Bank and KCB to support the growth of their green lending. And after seeing the video, are we with you? Because we should be, if we're not. Let's talk. We're also working with the government to support the development of a warehouse receipt system to strengthen the resilience of the country's agriculture system. And in a win for green building, the Mvule Gardens in Kenya, and I practice saying that with my driver, by 14 Trees Development is the first EDGE-certified 3D printed residential development in Africa. The project achieved 42% savings in energy use by building green. For those of you not familiar with EDGE, it's an IFC innovation that makes it easy to design and certify resource-efficient and zero-carbon buildings. By stepping up our investments for greener and more sustainable development, we can build more resilient economies. IFC is committed to growing our green financing even further. A key piece of this effort are the Climate Country and Development Reports, CCDRs. You know, in the World Bank, we like our acronyms, and that's a tool that we developed across the World Bank Group to jointly assess the opportunities to strengthen a country's green development. We'll be publishing a CCDR for Kenya soon that's going to provide us all further insights into the investment opportunities here. And we've already done similar diagnostics for other places in the region, like the Sahel, Malawi, Rwanda, Angola, just to name a few. We're also working with governments to develop frameworks to facilitate the issuance of green bonds and other sustainability-linked financing tools. We're doing this in South Africa and Ghana, for example. We've been leading a market study and a pilot on carbon capture and storage, or CCS, in Nigeria. CCS is one of the most impactful decarbonization technologies, but also one of the most challenging to commercialize. Unlocking CCS in hard-to-abate sectors in Africa may create more opportunities for climate investment and help untap carbon markets. And we're actively involved in discussions with major industrial players in Africa on the rollout of green hydrogen, which has significant decarbonization potential, both as a fuel and as a raw material. Climate change is a defining development issue of our time. I like your framing of an idea whose time has come, and one could argue it's close to passing us if we're not careful. It's going to require collective action and collective financing from public and private sector stakeholders that promise greener and more sustainable development. We join the call to realize the investment opportunities and impact financing can have on Africa's green future. So I will stop there before it gets too late, and thank you. And I look forward to our discussion this evening, but also I'm on week 3 of a 4-year assignment, so I hope to speak to all of you more going forward. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you could appreciate it just one more time with a round of applause. Given that she's on week 3 of a 4-year assignment, maybe we could do our trifecta clap, the one that we're famous for in Kenya. The 1, 2, 3 clap 3 times. So ladies and gentlemen, let's ready our hands to appreciate our keynote speaker for today. Let's go 1, 2, 3. Again. Once more. Thank you. Karibu sana. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we have heard from Director Julius, and you're telling us about that sustainability is no longer an option, but a necessity of today. This then was emphasized by Chair Patrick when he was saying that right now, Africa has the opportunity to change the narrative, and that the cost of transition is low for us. So why can't we start green? Then we had from Dennis and Chris Anderson, and they identified the 3 opportunities that we have as a continent about digitalization and the woman particularly. I got hung up on that because truly, women are the bedrock of the African society. Of course, we cannot forget the words by Group Director Lennox Mugambi when he was telling us that climate action and profit are interdependent and do not have to be at cross purposes. From Chair Kiprono Getoni, we heard that there's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. And right now, climate action and climate financing is the idea whose time has truly, truly come. And of course, we have heard from Miri Porta Poeshka, I hope I pronounced that correctly, who has told us so many good nuggets. But I think more particularly that they're working with Equity and KCB, and out of this, hopefully, we shall have a partnership with NCBA based on the video that we heard today. Now, ladies and gentlemen, when you were planning to come for this event, we wanted to have a session where we talk about the commitments that we want to make. Before I have Chair Kiprono's moment of my phone not coming on, and this was to have pronouncements towards climate action and business sustainability on the 2030 targets, highlighting 3 key areas and financial spend. We want to hear from these companies what impact they aim to make in sustainability. And this commitment is to demonstrate the respective organizations' dedication to a greener future and serve as a framework for collective progress. So to start us off with a commitment, went off. So to start us off with our commitments this evening, we would like to hear from NCBA, our main sponsor for this evening. Allow me, ladies and gentlemen, to ask you to please put your hands together for Group Director Lennox Mugambi to tell us the commitments that NCBA is going to make. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause. Thank you.
Our keynote speaker, Mary, can tell you that we're already on e-mobility and solar PV financing. In fact, some of our partners are here. Any of our partners, I can see Aston Field, you can lift up your hand. We do leasing of solar PV equipment together with Aston Field. Any other partner? Okay, we have quite, yes. Very good, there you go. So for us, it's something that is real, and tapping onto green bonds is an opportunity, I think, that will help us grow and scale up. So the commitments that we are giving as NCBA, the first one, we have 5 of them. Number one is we want to grow 10 million trees by 2030 together with our partners, okay? The second one is we want to ensure that 30% sustainability sourcing across our value chain. Anything that we source from a corporate perspective, 30% has to be sustainable sourcing. Number 3, we are going to provide training to all our 3,000 staff and empower them on sustainability, and they will be our ambassadors going out there. Number 4, which I'd also mentioned, is that we are going to mobilize 30 billion shillings towards sustainable financing solutions. Mobilize and steer 30 billion shillings towards that. And number 5, powering e-mobility with 2 billion shillings in terms of funding for e-mobility. We've already started, we've started installing charging stations on 2 of our branches, and we want to extend that to branches across the regions and the markets that we operate in. That is Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and Rwanda. So that's part of our sustainability action plan. Thank you.
In another life, maybe I'll come vertically advanced, like Group Director. And we're so grateful for the commitments that we've heard today from NCBA. Before I call upon our next partner, allow me to recognize from the Office of the First Lady, Julius Tinega. Julius, if you could just wave to us from wherever you are. We would just like to recognize you. Thank you. Let's have a round of applause. Who else has joined us this evening? We would just like to recognize you and appreciate you for you being here with us. Anybody else that has joined us as we continue with the proceedings? Then we are a full house. Allow me then at this juncture to go to Electricity of France. I shall not attempt the French pronunciation. Allow me to call upon Dennis and his partner, Anthony, to make their presentation. Thank you. Please, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome them with a round of applause.
All right. Good evening, everybody. My name is Anthony Mburu. I'm the General Manager for Distributed Power Africa Kenya Limited. We are delighted here to have our partner from DevKey, Guru Narendra Raval. We are pleased to have worked together to develop the largest CNI, commercial and industrial solar plant in East and Central Africa. And I'd love to say largest for now, because Guru has committed to even more action to combating climate change. And this is a showcase. I know the theme has been around climate finance, unlocking climate finance, access to climate finance. And this is a perfect example of what has been done. So we have a short 4-minute video, but before we go into the video, I'll invite Guru to just say a word or two before we screen the video. Karibu.
Thank you very much. I really forgot to bring papers and iPad and the telephone and speech. But I definitely appreciate this. Is a wonderful event, and I thank the chairman of our stock exchange, also the sponsor NCBA. I'm your customer. Please give us the dollar to make the environment better in the business sector. We have started a journey for the better environment since last 5 years. We have ventured into the solar energy with the EDF, and we are so happy with that I want to put it in all of my factory. It's not only saving our energy, but also it is quite efficient. In fact, we took more time for negotiation than they took the time for installation. So it is quite fast, quite quick, and no noise. So it is a wonderful experience we have. I don't want to take much of your time of the speeches because we heard a better speaker before me. But I must say that we have to work towards the better environment tomorrow for our children. And it is not supposed to be only on the papers and the talk and the speeches, but it should be implemented. We are also planting 4 million trees in 5 years' time, not 10 million or something like that at the NCBA because they have a lot of money. We are in steel and cement. But it is not, I must say that we always say that the life is once. And everybody says life is once, but life is not once. Life is every day. Death is once. We die once, and we will die very quick if we don't take care of this environment. I heard somebody talking, you are the one who was saying how many floods Africa had, how many people we have lost, how many life we have lost, how many houses is gone. So it is not something which we should take as a joke. And in our all factories, we are trying to make sure that we go more and more green. I have said earlier that I pay 900 million Kenya shillings per month for electricity bill in Kenya. Now I have reduced in this 1 year to 500 million. I promised to myself and my staff, we want to make it to 100 million. 10% only will use from the grid, rest I will produce from the waste heat. Wind power plant, which we already purchased, we are working with the one French company, so that's we are installing. We have waste heat recovery. It's only the first company in the world of the producing the steel. Steel needs a lot of energy, and it's my company. We produce our own energy. We need 90 megawatts. I produce myself is 80 megawatts, 65 to 80 megawatts from waste heat recovery, which steam comes out and we release into the chimney. We tap it. It is very costly. We spend $320 million. But it's free energy I'm getting today. And when we know household how much we are paying for the Kenya Power bill, it's gone out of the roof, out of hand. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I don't want to take much of your time. Thank you for giving me the chance to talk to you.
Listening to what he just said, that life is every day and death is just once, really is a stark reminder that we need to act today and not tomorrow. To quote our head of state, he normally says, kutenda, kusema na kutenda, isn't it? It is to say and do. It's not just enough to say, you must follow it up with action. Now, we have heard from DEFKey, we have heard from NCBA and their commitments. Is there anybody here representing your institutions that wants to join them in their pronouncements and their commitments? What are you going to do to be part of the solution where climate action is concerned? And more importantly, as we were told by Director Poeshka, that this just cannot be achieved by development partners. We do need the input of the private sector because the financing requirements are huge. And Director Lennox did say that climate action and profit are symbiotic and they need to work hand in hand. And we heard that Chair Kipruto, he told us that they even are developing a carbon exchange market. Something that, if you look at, the government is offering 15% in taxation for those institutions that offer those type of exchange securities. So do we have companies today? Yes, please join us. Come to the front. Please just tell me your name. So we have Mitha Mwema from the Nairobi Securities Exchange. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for Mitha.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'll ride on existing protocols. I'm here courtesy of my chairman, Mr. Kiprono Kitoni. I'd like to say what we've done at the Nairobi Securities Exchange. We have the first green bond, which is ACON, but over and above that, we've actually been going to the counties. We have visited 10 counties, spent at least 4 to 5 days in each of this. What we've done is on the first day, we speak to the governor, we then speak to his county officials. On the second day, we speak to the private sector. On the third and the fourth day, we actually go around looking for opportunities in green finance. And we have been working with verifiers to actually identify what are the funding needs. Now, the challenges that we've actually faced are this. There's what we define as green projects, what actually needs to align to the green bond policy framework, use of proceeds, what projects are you financing? And that's how we have instituted our market. However, the challenge has been for the issuers on the ground. They do want to facilitate green financing options, but then they're not ready because they actually don't comply with what is defined as a green bond. So what we have been doing as NSC, continue to commit to do, is to first and foremost continue with these engagements, go to the second level of saying, we have engaged with you. Unfortunately, it's been a struggle to identify bankable and investable green projects. However, we do want to bring our ecosystem of stockbrokers and investment banks to work with you in the next phase of capacity development to help you identify possible opportunities to finance and then work with them to structure this. So those are some of the commitments that we are making. The second thing that we're also doing is when it comes to carbon trading, we have seen that the Climate Act is out, and we are working with the relevant ministries to be able to facilitate a framework and a platform for trading. We're not working in isolation. We're actually now, it's becoming a conversation that is cutting across sub-Saharan Africa, where we're speaking to other exchanges and engaging with other exchanges and following from what Egypt has done and saying, as a securities exchange, what can we do to facilitate trading of these credits, not only locally, but also for global investors and connect all of this. So those are some of the things that we are doing, and certainly we welcome to work with IFC as well as we work with the other banks, because in as much as we are also facilitating bank debt, we need to do more to be able to seek guarantees from the government, guarantees for the private sector, guarantees for green equity, to be able to say, this is what we're doing in the capital markets. So over and above our commitments, we look forward to getting meetings with you to be able to then stretch our commitments forward. Thank you all for this, and I wish you all well. Good evening.
So, hello everybody. I'm not the best speaker, but somebody has encouraged me and coaxed me to come in here to speak today. And I must introduce my very distinguished guest, Mike Eldon, because Mike Eldon speaks so well about sustainability and climate change. And Mike, I don't know, do you want to say something on my behalf? Are you okay? Okay, thank you. So I'm June Segei. I'm the CEO of Africa Climate Change Action Foundation. And the word action is very important in our wording there, because we do actually want to take action. And I've had so much today, and I believe the corporate world is finally ready to embrace this issue that's called climate change. And it's no longer just a subsidiary topic that has some small office in a corner. It's actually something that they are taking very seriously. So for Africa Climate Change Foundation, we're a strategic investment fund, but we do invest in climate change smart projects. And what we do, what you call your ESG or CSR, we do grassroots initiatives, which include food security for schools and communities. So you grow houses, we don't call them greenhouses now. Greenhouses are not climate smart. And we do wash projects, and we do planting of trees. We have a mandate to have 50 million trees, actually, 2030 goal. But most importantly, which I didn't hear being mentioned today, is education. Education is very important because we have to get them while they're young. I'm sure in this room, if I talk to you about climate change, you're going to be like, blah, 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 blah. But if I talk to a young child today, and I tell the importance of conserving our environment, and they grow up knowing this is what they need to do, then I've captured their hearts. So we want to educate young children from when they're very young to the high school, tertiary level, and so on and so forth. So we are very active in doing that. We do 1 or 2 schools a month. Julius, I think I've talked to you about this. We want to involve corporates because no one person can do this. We want to involve government. There was somebody from First Lady's office because, again, you cannot do it alone. And we want to involve the NGO world, civil society, and so on and so forth, because we're not in competition. We're here to support this planet that we live in. More importantly, we're here to have African solutions for African problems. Thank you for hearing me. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Yesterday, we had 1,000 electric mobility vehicles on the roads of Nairobi, just to show the country what we have that's available. It was interesting. We did 50 kilometers with electric vehicles, so is it possible for an electrical vehicle to travel far? The answer is yes. What will the private sector do as a whole is we will take the lead and make sure that climate change and sustainability become a reality for everyone. So with that, we've been here long enough. I won't take up any more of your time. I'd like to wish you all a safe trip home, and let's spread the gospel about what it is we've come here to do, which is to create a sustainable future, not just for the future generation, but it starts with us and it starts today. Good night, everyone.
Ladies and gentlemen, before I close the function, allow me to call upon our speakers tonight to come for a photo session. Thereafter, I shall tell you our exit protocols. So allow me to call upon Director Julius, Chairman Patrick, Director Dennis, Group Director Lennox, Chairman Kiprono, our chief guest, Mary Porter Poeshka, and of course, Olivia Lamenya. If you could just come to the stage so we can do a photo session, and thereafter we can begin our exit protocols.